We're recording. Oh, jeez.
Excellent.
Okay.
Welcome, everyone. We are going to start, even though not everyone is here yet, to respect everyone's time because it's 6:05. I'm Tia. I work at the Sustainable Economies Law Center, and you are welcome to the Policy Cafe, which is part of our Transformative Policymakers project. It's a project we have where we just believe that everyone can make policy. And so this Policy Cafe is about ballot initiatives, and the Community Democracy Project has graciously volunteered to do the teach-in part of the Policy Cafe, which is the first hour. And then after that, if anyone has a policy recommendation that they want to see come to life, we will help you figure out what your next step is if you want to start your own ballot initiative. So that's what this is. I'm going to push it to Kyle and Victoria, who are awesome members of CDP.
Thank you, Tia. Thanks everyone for coming. So this is called Lost by the People, and we'll do a quick overview of the agenda so you know what's coming up. First we'll do a round of introductions. We can get to know each other since it's a small group. We'll go over the goals and visions of CDP and then some of the visions that we have in the room. We'll talk about our strategy for carrying out the campaign, and then some of the ballot initiative process, which is kind of the meat of what we're focusing on, and then how our values and structures kind of carry the campaign. Then we'll have time at the end for Q&A before going into the breakout rooms. So intros, we could go around, say name, gender, pronoun, if you'd like, and maybe share any experience that you have with community organizing or with other, if you've collected signatures before or anything like that. So like you said, I'm Kyle, it's he and him pronouns, and the Community Democracy Project is the first one that I've experienced with being involved in the campaign. Done like kind of one-off volunteering things before, but it's my first time at the campaign.
Hi, I'm Victoria. I use she and her pronouns. I work at Design Action Collective, which does kind of graphic design for social justice movements, and I am a member of the Community Democracy Project, which is a ballot initiative campaign that we're going to talk about today. And CDP, or the Community Democracy Project, is my main experience with ballot initiative campaigns.
Hi everyone, my name is Eric Medrano, pronouns he, him, his. My experience with community organizing, I used to be a campus organizer back at San Jose State, and so I worked with Students for Quality Education and did organizing with Mencha and other groups, and did a lot of social justice work. And I also did run part of the campaign for Measures OMP in Berkeley, local measures for housing, and yeah, that's about it.
Hi everybody. I'm D.H. Mayron, he, him, and his, and I'm the founder of Random Selection for Berkeley. It's a small group that wants to put a petition on the ballot to change how we pick our political officials instead of by elections.
Oh, like the Zapatistas. Random selection.
Random Selection.
Wow.
Hi everyone, I'm Gretchen, she, her, hers. I have no experience with community organizing, but I have been on CDP's mailing list for I don't know how many years, and this may have been the first one I clicked on for reasons I have no idea why. Other than I was curious.
Hi, I'm Dwayne Shaw, he, him, his. I don't have much experience with community organizing either. I have done some, I've dipped my toe in every once in a while, did some canvassing and things of that nature. And I will say I am piggybacking off Gretchen, luckily clicking the email. And I will say also that, I think it's Sean, whoever wrote was really, is really why I came today, because a lot of what was expressed in that short little write-up was really sort of resonated with me. So
Come to all of our events. Sean was supposed to present today, but he's sick. Yes, so I'm filling in for Sean. Sean, but if you hear him speak, it's so inspirational.
Yeah.
Yeah, you should
I
definitely-
echo that sentiment.
Yeah.
We will let
It
him.
was
I
pretty powerful,
Yeah.
I thought, so, anyway, that's what I thought.
So, my name is Yvonne Chen and I am a member of CP. And so I wanted to ask you if you're on the listserv. So,
I am not.
yeah, so everyone at the
But I
end.
will be.
Yeah.
We're gonna have about events. And then I'm she, her, and then I have experience community organizing when I was in college, and I tried to make extra money in summers as a campus serve, working families party and Democratic party.
I'm Tia. I use she and her pronouns, and I'm also a member of the Community Democracy Project. And I'm so happy that you said those things about Sean. We will tell him, and he might even feel better right away. Text him.
We'll send him the video. All the Sean love.
And I've done some other policy work with the L. Baker Center for Human Rights when we still worked there many years ago. But this is my first ballot initiative campaign, and so I'm excited for all of you to be here.
And I didn't introduce myself. I'm Janelle. I use she. That's okay. I work here at Sustainable Economies Law Center. I'm a big fan of CDPs, very inspired by what you all are doing and then how you're going about doing it, which I think is also like the process you're using has been really inspiring. I've gathered a lot of signatures for things, but never ballot initiatives, usually just petitions of various sorts. And worked on a lot of policy things, but I'm very intrigued by ballot initiatives and feel like I might want to start using that more as a tool in my advocacy.
We'll try to capture some of Sean's speaking style, and it'll be it's
Spectator politics, yeah, civic engagement.
well, it's big shoes to fill, but we'll see what we can do. Okay, so thanks for sharing, everyone. It seems like you have a good mix of experiences and backgrounds coming into this. So yeah, Victoria, can you talk about the vision?
Yeah, so first we're just going to start off with having what your goals and visions are for your ideas for Oakland and California, because they inform a lot of how we go about our process and what we're even trying to do. So if this is your first time at a Community Democracy Project event, let me give you a quick introduction to us. We are an all-volunteer campaign to turn the power structure of Oakland right side up by putting the people in charge of the city budget. So we are trying to bring participatory budgeting to Oakland. Has anyone here heard of participatory budgeting before, kind of have an idea of what it is? Tia or Janelle, would you like to define what it is?
Ooh, I'll let Janelle do that.
Oh my gosh.
With a hamlet.
Somebody created an amazing cartoon, but I think it takes a big chunk of the money of a city and puts the decision making about that money into the hands of citizens and hopefully engages people at a very localized neighborhood level so they could actually see how expenditures can impact the world around them.
That was beautiful.
That's exactly it.
That is exactly what it is. So participatory budgeting is basically allowing the residents of a community to decide how its tax dollars are spent, which should not seem like such a radical idea, but in our current economy and politics, it kind of is. So that's what we're trying to do. We are a grassroots organization, which means we're all volunteer and we try to be bottom up. We're trying to bring the issues and concerns of the people to politics. And basically, we are looking for structural and proactive change, not just reactionary, protests and going to direct actions, even though those are very important things. But we are trying to create from the bottom up like a different structure so that everybody can actually be enfranchised. And so we are trying to bring participatory budgeting to Oakland by introducing a city charter amendment, which would be a constitutional change to Oakland's city charter. And so that's why we're trying to do it through a ballot initiative campaign. And it would actually create a department of participatory budgeting in Oakland. And it would also create neighborhood assemblies throughout Oakland, I think about 155. And these neighborhood assemblies would be a core piece of the change we're trying to see in Oakland, which is they would be kind of public spaces where every month people could come and organize in their own neighborhoods and run their own meetings and basically hear petitions from different city officials or different programs that wanted to be funded and kind of learn about how the city runs, what issues are most affecting their neighbors, get to meet their neighbors and talk and meet with them face to face, and kind of just begin organizing themselves. And then once a year throughout the city, anyone who is a resident 16 years or older could actually vote on the city budget and decide for themselves how much money they want to go to libraries, how much to parks, how much to housing, how much to the police. And so this would mean that the city's budget and the city's spending would reflect the priorities of its actual residents. Right now, the way the city budget gets decided is that the mayor and city council kind of just get to propose it and rubber stamp it themselves. And as we know, sadly, a lot of times politicians don't always reflect the priorities of the people they represent, even though it's supposed to be a democracy. And so what we're trying to introduce is actual direct democracy so that people have more control over how the city runs. And we've kind of gone door to door knocking before, and so we have kind of a sense of what different issues affect Oakland the most, and we have seen for ourselves that the city's budget as it is spent right now do not necessarily reflect that. So that is the change that we are trying to see in the world, and we're trying to promote things like direct democracy, active citizenship, and grassroots involvement in all of this. So we kind of want to have this be an ongoing discussion as we're going throughout the presentation. So if all of you are here, it means that you probably have some idea of some changes that you would like to see in Oakland or in your local community. So we're just curious. I know some of you introduced it in your intros, but are there any issues in particular that brought you out here tonight? Are there any changes that you would like to see in Oakland or California that you think you could start doing by being part of a campaign or anything? And so I don't know if we want to do small groups or just go around.
I think it's small enough that we can go around.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I can start. I would like to see the people be in charge of the city budget and be able to actually be empowered to make decisions for themselves, because I really believe that people can decide for themselves how they should run things, and I have a lot of faith in people that way. So is there anything in particular that you would like to see changed?
It's not very specific, but so recently I've been starting to look into working with the City of Oakland in economic development. And one of the huge differences I saw when I went to City and County of San Francisco was that they have a lot more resources, and it's easier to access folks in San Francisco local government than it is in Oakland. And I do know that part of that is that like the city manager, the discrepancy in which how much they're paid versus how many funds are allocated is vastly different. And so that would be one of the things. And of course, there's also OUSD is struggling, Oakland Unified School District. So a change in that and how it's been managed, how that's been funded. I would say those two are top of mind, but definitely smaller things for them.
Do you want to go with, sorry, what was your name? DH?
Well, what brought me out here tonight was I was hoping to get some education about how to put a proposal for a change on the ballot, and then get it actually.
I guess we can go do it for the new people that came in. You can really quickly introduce yourselves with your name and gender pronoun, and then say if there's any issues that brought you out here tonight in particular.
Hi, my name is Miriam. I use she, her pronouns, and my coworker let me know about this last minute, and I'm really interested in public and participatory budgeting, so I want to learn more about how it happens here in Oakland. I work for the city of San Francisco, recent college graduate, so I'm just trying to understand all of these new terms and practices, so thank you for having me tonight.
Gretchen, and there aren't any issues in particular. I'm more interested in the participatory part. I'm just kind of fascinated by process, and I have a feeling once I start paying attention and listening, that once I understand the participatory part better, then it will become clearer and clearer what the issues are. And certainly budgeting, I've personally gotten super into my own personal budgeting for the first time. I'm a big fan of the software You Need a Budget.
I use it too. I use it too. Yeah.
So I think there's just because I'm loving that so much, and the clarity and calm and ease in my life, it just personally is coming in from that. It just makes me curious about how we can have that on a larger scale.
And how we can help make decisions about
Dwayne again. I actually just wanted to come and sort of be educated on, or I actually never heard of the term before. And sort of what you just laid out makes complete sense to me. And so I just wanted to sort of learn a little bit more about it, and then also to hear like, and just get a sense of like, well, how is this going to be implemented? What are challenges? And also just, I don't have anything in particular that I've brought with me today, but I am curious to know if this is happening elsewhere and where and what are the results, like what are the sort of like what are the outcomes?
Yvonne, do you want to go?
Sure. And I think the biggest issue, and I've heard this from my door knocking experience, is the homelessness issue and the affordability issues here. So, I mean, it's just like so visible, and you're just like, well, what is the city doing about it, right? Like, instead of Band-Aid solutions, like, what can we really do about it? So yeah, I would really like to see that change while I live here in Oakland.
Do you want to give your name and gender pronoun and just like, what brought you out here tonight?
Sure. Ellen, she, her, and I came out here tonight to support CDP and also just to, I guess, hear the conversation.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Janelle and I didn't go yet.
Oh, that's right, because you don't matter. Tina, Janelle.
Let's see. I want many things to change in our wonderful city. One thing I'd love is to have more worker-owned cooperatives, and also more services for survivors of domestic violence. And I think that from the door knocking that we've done, people care about their neighbors, and they just don't know how to help out. And usually the way to help out is by funding something, and we have $1 billion every year in Oakland to spend, and I think we don't spend it as effectively as we can. So that's why I'm here.
Yeah, I want a lot of things. Just lately in the last week or two, I'm doing a lot of research on publicly owned enterprises, like what if the state owned a pharmaceutical company and we all got low-cost medications, that kind of thing. And I was reading the Constitution and realizing that the voters have created things like this. Like the voters have created the California Center for Regenerative Medicine and that kind of thing. And it's just like the idea that we as voters could create ballot initiatives and create enterprises that our state will run for us. Like, that's pretty cool. So it's putting ideas in my head.
Yeah, and just to respond, I'm so glad to hear people's thought processes because like in one of the last kind of budget analyses we did, I think Oakland was spending 24% of its budget on the police. And I think it was like, was it 11% on housing? It was something ridiculously out of proportion like that. And given when through our door knocking and just like the, the ways that when we talk to people and our own neighbors in Oakland, those do not necessarily reflect people's priorities. Like when we see the housing crisis here, like if we were just putting more money in even, I mean, that's not the solution, but like the level of funding that we don't put in to like kind of crises that we see in front of us today, all of those things could be possibly fixed through the people having more say in their city budget and actually being able to kind of help even out some of those disproportionate spending crises. So, and yeah, this is just like really, and just the way that we can promote like a more participatory culture, I think is something that you can do through a ballot initiative campaign as well as just through whatever organizing you want to.
So, okay, yeah, so that leads us into talking a little bit about strategy, which might touch on some of the questions that were raised. There are a lot of different ways that your campaign might organize itself and accomplish its goals. So the one that we're all here for today is Ballot Initiatives. There's a few distinctions within that. There's, so the charter amendment, which is what CDP is doing, is a change to the text of the city charter. And that's a pretty high bar that has to be cleared. 15% of registered voters need to sign to get it on the ballot. We'll talk more about that later though. There's also ordinances and stuff, so if you want to make a change to maybe like a ban smoking outside a doorway or certain other, like, you know, not a charter amendment, but a regular ordinance that has a lower threshold, but that's another change that you can make. Any new taxes have to go through ballot initiatives. This could be state or local, and depending on where the tax money is being spent, it affects some of the rules around how many signatures you need and what percentage of people need to vote. I don't think anyone mentioned new taxes though in our go around, so that's. It's also important to think about like what level your change is. If it's something with school districts, it might be like a state level initiative versus a local initiative. And we're doing a local initiative, of course. That's what all our details are focused on. Other things you might just do lobbying, like if you know that your issue is something that the city council or mayor can get on board with, like you don't have to convince them too much, you just need to get them to put some time and effort into it. You might be able to lobby for your idea. You can do pressure campaigns where you try to change their minds by maybe holding protests or calling their offices or whatever. But that's all going through kind of the established channels as opposed to a ballot initiative, which is just to kind of collect popular support for your idea and make the change more directly. And then direct action can build visibility and elevate your platform, and that kind of feeds into any of the other approaches. So it does kind of sound like everyone here is definitely interested in the ballot initiative strategy, the people that brought up their issues and stuff. If anyone has thoughts on like comparing, like if you've tried lobbying or pressure campaigns before, if anyone has just something interesting to share about the differences.
You want to go back to your slide or chat?
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah.
If some of you mentioned that like our last newsletter is what brought you out here, which was Sean's very moving kind of history of how he went from being all about direct action all the time, kind of going out to every protest, and then deciding that that wasn't enough of a structural change for him, that he ended up just responding to the same problems over and over again and seeing people burn out, which is something that we see a lot whenever we're out organizing or in the streets. And so that's definitely an important avenue of creating change, and that's something that we still need to do. But and like these pressure campaigns are just like another way to kind of get leaders to kind of change their minds. But the ballot initiative, why it appeals to us, I think, is that it is more of a grassroots kind of like popular tool to use, and it's a way to bypass actually legislators. It's a way to bypass kind of lawmakers and make it so that the laws are by the people instead of just the politicians. So that's a big reason why we chose a ballot initiative campaign. And it seems like that would be useful for DH's initiative, where you're trying to take power away also from elected officials, or at least like make it so it's a little less predictable for them. But yeah, does anyone else have any other experience with any of these other methods of creating change? And have you kind of had your own thoughts?
I just started working at the Sustainable Economies Law Center last year in May, so I wasn't part of this policy campaign, but recently we were able to get the City Council of Berkeley to adopt a set of recommendations that we had to support so that they can support worker-owned cooperatives, and one of the recommendations was to make available the revolving loan fund to worker-owned cooperatives, which it's not available to them right now. And that was like I think it was like a 3-year-long campaign to make that happen. And it's really, it's huge, it's groundbreaking, and it's really inspiring to see that happen. But we also tried to do that work in Oakland, and the Oakland City Council members that we were working with were really on board, and then all of a sudden they weren't, and so it didn't pass in Oakland. So that's my experience at Sub.
I just had a question. Do you know what the consequences were, why they switched all of a sudden when they were on board? No?
There are many things that they're dealing with, so maybe that was just deprioritized. But I'm speculating, I have no idea.
Could you mention also why you are so passionate about worker-owned cooperatives?
Oh, well.
Okay, never mind. If
Educating people control in their workplace is really, if you work 8 hours a day in a place, you should, we think, be able to have a say in it more. But you probably have more
more stories.
lobbying?
Yeah, we've done a lot at the state level and have had to learn just how quirky and weird legislators are, like the policymakers. And so there's just like, it's like a club with its own etiquette and its weird timelines. And it's like if you ask a legislator to introduce a bill for you, you kind of have to wait until they say yes or no before you go ask another legislator. And so there's so many unpredictable factors to whether or not your bill will be introduced. And then once it's introduced, whether a legislature will put effort behind it. And then you have to behave nicely even when they're not doing well. Like we used to express a lot of our frustrations here in the office by drawing cartoons about legislators. We used to have like the potted plant of the month, which was the legislator of the month that we were the most frustrated with. I don't know, so it's just like you just sort of put you have a great legislation in mind, you put it in the hands of other people who have so many other agendas, and you can't control the timelines or anything. So it is frustrating, but there's a lot, I think, with probably ballot initiatives that you can't control, but it almost feels like you can control it more because it's about the people, and I don't know, maybe not. It would be interesting to hear from you all, because I know you had a long timeline, but you've planned it out very thoughtfully, right?
Yes. Was your potted plant did you drown it or not water it?
It was a cartoon, the potted plant of the month. We had legislators argue with one of our bills once by saying that tenants shouldn't have a right to have potted plants. We were like, come on, tenants should have a right to grow food, that kind of thing. And I don't know, we argued a lot about potted plants.
I have a question actually, because I realize I've been making an assumption, but I'm so new to any of this. Like, I'm assuming that what a ballot initiative is, you haven't actually defined it, but I assume that means that, like, my experience is I have gone to the polls and I have voted.
Yeah.
And so I assume that means I get an opportunity to fill in the little arrow
Yes.
for what I want on an initiative. And so then the other thing I will say from my personal experience is huge burnout in the state of California because there are so many initiatives on various different levels. And so that is a question and concern I have, is how do we not overwhelm? But like, if we're saying this is a really wonderful way to make decisions, like we can take ownership, but how do we, like the burnout that the lawmakers have, how do we not just transfer that onto the people?
That's interesting.
So that is a question.
Decision fatigue of the
Exactly.
voters, interesting.
It's really good.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's say that.
So
Q&A.
let's.
This does lead us into the process part now. Yeah, so that's why we're all here, right? There's a bunch of different approaches we can take, but the ballot initiative approach is one. Were you going to do this section?
Yeah, so for the ballot initiative, like the initiative is basically a way to get a law passed without having to go through legislators. And like the one we're doing is a direct initiative where the people actually petition for it and then it gets directly onto the ballot just by the number of signatures that our petition gets. And so what we're trying to do, you can do it at the state or local level. And it's very similar process at both levels, slightly different in terms of like the filing fees and like the timelines. But for ours, we would have, yes, it would be like once it actually got onto the ballot, it would be one of the propositions that you would see. In order to get it there, you have to like write a draft of your initiative and have it looked at by a lawyer, and by this end you would meet with the city attorney to kind of let them know like, hey, I'm planning on filing this, what's the timeline, what's the best election to get it on, because it does take a long time. And you would then file a notice of intent with your initiative and a $200 filing fee with the city attorney. We have examples of a previous petition that we have written for our initiative. And then the city attorney comes up with an official title and summary, and this would be like the title that you would see at kind of the left-hand side near the bottom or near the middle. And this is kind of what your proposition would be known by if it were to actually get on the ballot. And so they would write the title and summary for you, and then you kind of go back and forth and negotiate with the city's office, like, is this how you want it worded? Like, is this actually how you want your proposition or your petition to be represented? And then once all of that is approved and you have officially decided to file your petition, you have 180 days or 6 months to get enough signatures on your petition, like on the back page of that you would see where you would sign it. And that's, I'm sure if you've been walking around out in public anywhere, you've had signature gatherers come up to you and ask you to sign a petition. But basically those people would have 6 months from the time that you file to actually file the petition. And you would need to get signatures from registered voters, in our case of Oakland, or if it was a state measure, it would be California. And since ours is a charter amendment, which is a constitutional amendment to the city of Oakland, we need 15% of registered voters to actually sign so that we can actually get it on the ballot, which is about 36,000 people, and you probably want more than that just as a cushion, because a lot of people might be duplicates or might not actually be eligible. And so we're actually trying to get about 40,000 people to sign our petition. If it's just a regular ordinance, you only need 10%. And this is, I think, true in California as well. California, you need like a $2,000 filing fee so that there aren't any frivolous propositions put on the ballot. And then there's a period after that where, you know, there's counting and verification. I think they have 30 days to do so, and then you need to actually have all of that ready a certain number of days before the election that you want it to be on. So CDP is hoping to have our ballot proposition on a 2020 ballot, in which case we need to start gathering signatures over the summer and have a 6-month period then. And then if we are able to gather those signatures, then we would actually be a proposition on the ballot. In response to your question about like decision fatigue, yeah, I totally feel you, because every time an election comes around, you're just like at the last minute, like, oh my God, like what do all of these things mean? And for us, that's partly why our initiative is so much about changing the culture of voting, and not just, you know, not just like throwing information at people and just being, just click this and like, you know, everything will be fine. But ours is about creating neighborhood assemblies, and obviously there's like a what's it called? A contradiction in which, you know, we need to get our ballot proposition passed in order to do this, but our organizing style also reflects our values and the change that we're hoping to see in terms of like how the community interacts with things like this. But basically we would want to make it so that we're creating a culture where people actually have spaces in order to get educated and have kind of a regular practice of educating themselves and each other. And I think whenever we kind of like distribute that work among everybody, it becomes less of a chore for people to individually have to educate each other. If we have that practice where we're ongoing and kind of meeting up every month and having spaces where it's possible for us to kind of come and engage and learn just as part of our regular routine, I think that would help alleviate some of that. But it is about changing the culture, which is a difficult and long thing to do.
I have a question. You say 10% of registered voters in Oakland is 24,000, which means 240,000 registered voters in Oakland. And the population of Oakland is like 320,000. Are you saying that 3/4 of all the people, including kids, are registered voters?
I mean, these are the numbers we've been using. I forget where we got them from.
Yeah, these are numbers based on previous elections, I believe. Yeah.
Okay, I mean, it just doesn't.
Do you know?
Population is
Bell-
over
Bell
400.
went off.
I think it's over 400,000.
So it's more people than you would have thought? You were thinking that there'd
I
be
don't
fewer
think there's
than-
240,000 registered voters in Oakland.
Do you know what the number is in Berkeley?
It's about-
If it is lower, that's good news for
I know.
us.
We are aiming way too high.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. That
No.
we looked it up, I guess, a while ago, and
Yeah.
that's, unless we were looking at the wrong spot, that's the number we
But
saw. So
something
it's
to check.
going off of, yeah.
Yeah.
So I have a question about the city attorney piece where, so the city attorney comes up with the official title and summary for your ballot initiative?
Mhm.
Right.
So what is that process like?
So
Because
yes,
part
if
of what is annoying to me about the initiative, the ballot initiatives, is that they're often worded in a way to make you think the opposite of what they're doing.
Mhm.
So I would imagine, I understand that corporations they're probably well versed in doing that kind of thing, but like, for you, like, how much negotiation is there in like what it's called and the summary? That seems like it'd be really important, and why is the city attorney doing that?
Yeah, we've done this twice. I know you don't know. We've tried to gather signatures twice
Yeah.
and haven't had enough volunteers to gather 40,000 signatures. But the first time, the city attorney made some mistake on the summary. It was like a blatant mistake. And so we had to go back and tell them, you know, please correct this, and they corrected it. But if it was more like taking away legalese or making this more accessible so people understand it, I don't think there's a lot of negotiation room there. They just do it unless it's actually wrong. And then, yeah, even the title, which is always super boring.
But something that's maybe misleading, like,
Yeah.
I don't know, I guess maybe if the campaign thinks the misleadingness helps with them, then they would accept it, like.
Yeah, it's like a couple, it can take like a few weeks apparently to go back and forth and like, you know, there's pressure then if you are on a certain timeline to get your
Right.
thing going. So I think it's just a matter of building that into your timeline and accepting that some titles might just be difficult to understand. But that is the problem.
Yeah, it feels like a very non-participatory way to,
Yeah.
like this weird tiny little pinprick to get to. It's to like have
Like, it
one
has to
person
follow through.
have the power to articulate using the word that they choose.
Right. I mean, most of our democratic institutions are not actually built for real participation.
Oh,
Right,
yeah.
right, it's fascinating.
People have sued the city attorneys when they didn't get what they wanted on their initiatives.
So did you all write the actual language with your lawyer?
What does that mean?
I'm just like, do you have to have a lawyer first of all? Like, what's the deal with your lawyer?
I think, well, we had ours looked over by a lawyer.
Yeah, you don't actually need, like,
You don't
the lawyer
need a
doesn't
lawyer.
represent you, there's no contract, it was a
Yeah.
volunteer lawyer.
It's
Okay.
basically just to make sure that like it's not completely, like the language you're using is not like illegal or like that it would be approved by the city attorney if they were to look at it. It's not a requirement, it's just a recommendation that you have a lawyer look it over if you can.
Okay.
Some people here might know lawyers.
So who actually wrote this?
Yeah, the first iteration of the Community Democracy Project was born out of Occupy Oakland, and they had subcommittees that met, and they wrote it together. And then the lawyers at Dan Siegel's office helped make sure it was constitutional and stuff.
But the city attorney didn't mess with the language.
Not a language. So
No,
you just a title and summary. This
Oh, okay.
bold part.
Just that
Just the
awful
first
thing.
page,
Yeah.
yeah.
Right.
But that's how most people read.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
They do still have a lot of power.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Sean would have had a good response about the decision fatigue and everything, so I should